Growing up in the 90s, my friends and I all thought the best fighter in the world was the best karate black belt in the world. Then MMA rose to popularity, and we quickly learned that other disciplines like wrestling, boxing, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and others were far more effective than karate in actual cage fighting and hand-to-hand combat. But then came Lyoto the Dragon Machida, a Brazilian-born, half-Brazilian, half-Japanese fighter who used the traditional Shotokan Karate style as his main fighting discipline. While Machida was an extremely well-rounded fighter and more than proficient in all areas of the game, his main identity was that of a karate fighter. Lyoto would go on to have a Hall of Fame career and use his unique karate striking to eventually win the UFC light heavyweight belt. Now, up until this time, Georges St-Pierre was the only modern-day MMA champion who stressed the importance of karate in his regimen. During his rise, Lyoto looked unstoppable. A lot of people thought when his career was said and done, he would be in contention, or at least in the conversation, for the greatest fighter of all time. Machida gave us some of the most exciting finishes we'd ever seen in MMA, such as the forearm choke against Michael McDonald early in his career. If you don't know what the forearm choke is, go look it up. It's extremely rare in MMA. His jumping front kick KO of Vitor Belfort, and easily his most famous moment, the flying crane kick knockout of Randy Couture. And yes, that's basically the same crane kick you saw in The Karate Kid, if you've seen that movie. So given all this, how could I say that Machida was an underappreciated fighter? Well, long story short, his time at the top was relatively short-lived. After running through UFC legends like Tito Ortiz, Thiago Silva, Rashad Evans, and Mauricio Shogun Rua, a lot of people thought Machida was going to be on top for a long time. People even said he was the next Anderson Silva. But unfortunately for Lyoto, he would only defend the light heavyweight belt once and never touch gold again. Now, it doesn't really matter how impressive you were on your rise to the top, and Machida was impressive, starting off his professional career at 16-0. But if you only defend your belt once, that basically eliminates you from the greatest of all time conversation. So while the potential was absolutely there, unfortunately his actual record, his actual career, didn't really reflect how truly good he was. His skills were on par with the best to ever do it, Anderson Silva, Georges St-Pierre, you name it. But his record and his lack of title defenses brought down his appreciation in some regards. So even though he was really appreciated and respected and beloved by the fans, I still consider him underappreciated because the appreciation for what Lyoto Machida showed us should be up there with the likes of Anderson Silva and the other greats. But before we cover Lyoto's career in further depth, let's talk about his origin story. Lyoto Carvalho Machida was born in Salvador, Bahia, Brazil in 1978. His dad was a Japanese man who moved to Brazil at age 22. But back in Japan before he moved, he was a notable Shotokan Karate instructor. Lyoto's dad, Yoshiza Machida, put Lyoto and his older brother Chinzo Machida in martial arts at a young age. Lyoto started training karate at age 3 and earned his black belt by age 13. Also, when he was 8 years old, he started training in sumo wrestling. Yes, you heard that right. Lyoto even won, as an adult, 2 Brazilian sumo wrestling national championships. At age 16, Machida started training in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and boxing. In his late teen years, he started studying Muay Thai and eventually moved to Thailand to study with the best. After spending some time in Thailand studying Muay Thai, he later went on to Japan to learn some Japanese grappling techniques. So yes, Lyoto Machida was known as the karate guy in modern MMA, but you can clearly see by now, he was well-rounded. As a young adult, Lyoto began winning numerous Shotokan Karate tournaments and even fought his older brother Chinzo in a tournament finals, which saw Lyoto defeat his older brother and give him a permanent scar on his face. Fun fact, Chinzo would go on to become a professional fighter as well, fighting as recently as 2017 under the Bellator banner. Lyoto made his professional MMA debut in Japan in 2003 for a promotion called New Japan Pro Wrestling. He ended up defeating Kengo Watanabe by decision. His second pro fight took place in Brazil for a promotion called Jungle Fight. He fought future UFC Hall of Famer Stephan Bonnar and won by TKO. The doctor stopped the fight due to a heavy cut over Bonnar's right eye. And as you can see here, he's leaking pretty badly. They really had no choice but to stop that one. He later went back to Japan to fight for a promotion called K1. If you're new to MMA, read up on K1. It's one of the most notorious promotions ever, and some of the most legendary fights ever took place in K1. In 2007, Lyoto finally signed with the UFC, holding a record of 8-0. Lyoto would start his UFC career with a handful of decision wins, earning him the reputation of being extremely skilled and cerebral, but perhaps not the most exciting fighter. But his reputation began to change in 2009 when he defeated Thiago Silva via KO. This victory earned him a title shot against UFC legend Rashad Evans. Lyoto used his classic outside distance karate style kicks to soften up Rashad, but ultimately finished the fight with devastating boxing combos. In his post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, Machida would give us a quote that would follow him for the rest of his career. An enthused Machida yelled, "Karate is back. Machida Karate." From this moment forward, his unique style of mixing karate with the other martial arts became known as Machida Karate. Now at this point, appreciation for Lyoto was skyrocketing, and he was a fan favorite. If he could keep putting together fights like that, he might have ended up being the most appreciated fighter of all time. So with his stock at an all-time high, it was time for Machida to defend his belt. The first title defense would come against Mauricio Shogun Rua. Lyoto ended up defeating Shogun via unanimous decision, but the fight was so close, Dana White thought a rematch was deserved. Unfortunately for Lyoto, he got knocked out in the rematch. Having only defended the belt once, it was going to be interesting to see how Lyoto bounced back. Lyoto's comeback fight would be against Rampage Jackson, who's easily one of the more intimidating fighters to ever fight in the UFC. Unfortunately for Lyoto, he lost a split decision, but in the post-fight press conference, Rampage even said himself that he thought Lyoto won the fight. So this is one of the, things like this going against Lyoto really tallied up as his career went on. Next up for Lyoto was UFC legend Randy Couture. Lyoto would meet Randy Couture in April of 2011. Now, even though Lyoto didn't have the belt when he fought Randy, this fight would go on to be one of the most symbolic moments of Lyoto's career. He knocked out Randy Couture with his legendary crane kick, something we had really only seen in movies like The Karate Kid at the time. So as you can see, Lyoto really was holding it down for karate in professional MMA. This game-changing knockout earned him another shot at the belt, facing Jon Jones at the end of 2011. Unfortunately for Lyoto, this night he'd contribute to Jon Jones's highlight reel. Jones ended up finishing Machida with a standing guillotine, and in the process gave us one of the coldest pictures we've ever seen in MMA. I know this video is about Lyoto, but damn, look at this young buck 24-year-old Jon Jones. That's cold. It was actually kind of spooky seeing Lyoto's limp body fall to the floor like that, if I'm being honest. After this fight with Jones, Lyoto decided to drop down to middleweight, try a new division. Lyoto's time at middleweight was up and down. He'd get a couple wins, then lose. A couple more wins, then lose. Finally, in 2014, Lyoto would get his second shot at UFC Gold, albeit at 185 pounds instead of 205 pounds. He'd end up facing Chris Weidman for the strap. Weidman defeated Lyoto via unanimous decision, and it appeared that Lyoto's time at the top might be already over. Lyoto did have some good moments after this, such as his famous front kick KO of Vitor Belfort, but really, his career was on its way down. Additionally, towards the end of his time with the UFC, unfortunately, Lyoto would be popped for banned substances. Lyoto was given an 18-month suspension for the use of these performance-enhancing drugs. Now, even though steroid use was not uncommon in MMA, this suspension still caused Lyoto's reputation to take a bit of a hit, as you would imagine. So after all this chaos that occurred during his UFC career, finally Lyoto went over and signed with Bellator to finish off his career. Now Lyoto the Dragon is still active, but unfortunately he's lost his last 3 bouts. Assuming his career ends soon, it is time to start deciding what is Lyoto the Dragon Machida's legacy. Are people going to remember him as one of the most talented fighters we've ever seen? Or are they going to say he's a fighter who never reached his full potential? For me, Machida's legacy is one of precise karate fighting, relying on intelligence and technique over muscle and brawn. He fought at different angles than other fighters. He could create his own offense or counter-strike. He could grapple. He could throw varying attacks, proven by his front kick KO of Vitor Belfort, his crane kick of Randy Couture, and his forearm choke against Michael McDonald. Now, this doesn't really have anything to do with how good he was as a fighter, but it is also important to note how Lyoto carried himself throughout his career. Lyoto respected everyone and was such a nice person that he was even known for pulling punches. You know, when someone gets knocked out and a fighter adds 2 more unnecessary punches? Numerous times throughout his career, Lyoto had knocked someone out cold, could have tacked on a few more punches, but didn't. So given all this, how is Lyoto underappreciated? I do want to touch base again on the fact that he was well appreciated and people respect him. Absolutely, he's a Hall of Famer. But I think his skills were so immense that he should have been appreciated even more. He was so good at karate that perhaps we forget how well-rounded he was. He's a martial artist who started training at 3 years old and became proficient in every aspect of the sport, something that was relatively ahead of its time. Then you add in the fact that he proved to us all that a traditional karate stance and identity could succeed in modern MMA. Ultimately, Lyoto Machida was a unique fighter who we should all be thankful for. I have to say, nowadays, with everyone trying to talk shit like they're Conor McGregor, I miss Lyoto Machida. I miss a poised fighter who believed in the traditional principles of unarmed combat. So thank you, Lyoto Machida, for being unique, sticking to your tradition, and giving us some of the best moments in MMA history.